So, Bill C-5, which we're debating today, two main parts. The first has to do with interprovincial trade. So, as we all know, as we've heard in the debate today, Conservatives have long called for the easing of interprovincial trade barriers as essential for boosting economic efficiency, fostering national unity, and enhancing competitiveness in the global economy. And one of the most compelling reasons to dismantle interprovincial trade barriers is the potential for significant economic gains. A more integrated domestic market would allow businesses to scale operations more efficiently, access a larger customer base, and reduce duplication and costs. Of course, here in Ontario, it's estimated that could mean about $200 billion annually in this province. But C-5, as mentioned today as well, only takes baby steps and falls short of where we need to be. And I'm afraid C-5, unfortunately, may not have any impact at all at removing those barriers to interprovincial trade. The second, of course, and probably the most controversial, it's around natural resource development. So Bill C-5 attempts to address the effects of a decade of Liberals' mismanagement of the economy by introducing measures to fast-track major projects in Canada. After an admission that the Liberals caused the problem through Liberal laws that have made it impossible to get anything built in this country, the Liberals have turned to allowing certain projects, like those politically favored and lobbied by Liberal insiders, like maybe GC Strategies, no doubt, to circumvent those Liberal laws. So Conservatives do agree with the Liberals that it is all their fault, the fact that the economy is stalling when it comes to natural resource development, and that their own legislation has hobbled the Canadian economy and actually has put us at risk due to the desires of the administration down south. So the ongoing dangers of the economic waters that have become unsettled, of course, we've known them. We've called it out over 10 years. The Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. C-48, the tanker ban, which won't let Alberta Energy leave off our west coast, and of course our emission caps, and many more barriers and hurdles to economic growth and expansion have all been put in place by this government. And fortunately, we now get to a place where the Prime Minister is saying that if a project is to be determined in the national interest, federal reviews will shift from whether these projects get built to how best to advance them. Apparently, according to the Prime Minister and multiple media sources, it's meant to streamline multiple decision points for federal approval while minimizing risk of not securing project approval following extensive project risk. So aside from the part where this creates a system where we have more people regulating an industry than you have actually working in it, that's a problem. The Prime Minister has, again, no problem creating more white-collar desk workers with government authorities simply to expand the class of people who will always be loyal for the growth of big government, and that, again, is a choke point for innovation and productivity. So let's be clear. We're not saying let's promote dirty air and dirty water. We all breathe and eat the same things. We want the cleanest possible. But when you have a political class that has no compassion on the impact of their decisions, because government always gets paid first, they always get fed first, they never run out of supply, that's a problem. And it's clear this legislation, without the removal of key pieces of previous government legislation, I mentioned C-69, C-48, and many more, the regulatory system will continue to choke industry and continue to stifle investment from abroad. What the Liberals have done is to continue with this piece of legislation to reduce our ability to extract energy and sell it to the world unless powerful lawyers and lobbyists cozy up to Liberal politicians to get their project fast-tracked. Again, this leads to more government control. And why do you think this is? Well, it's the same thing the Liberals seem to love with so-called green energy, more alternative energy, but green energy. It's mostly about control. So this way, the government decides who gets the government grants and who gets the fast-track approvals to bypass the legislative regulatory framework. Of course, it happened in Ontario under Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. We all know about the Green Energy Act, where favored companies got these big contracts and grants and were able to steamroll through already in place legislation that prevented some of these projects from going forward. In essence, the government wants you to buy primary services from them with your tax dollars, with all of the grants going to their chosen companies, again, with some link to government. This is how the power broker class does business. And this is why government had no problem pushing TransCanada out of building the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The regulatory burden, the regulatory framework was so much the company had to give up. The only reason it was able to be completed is if government took over the project, again with endless resources at their backing, and that is the tax base, the taxpayers of this country. And that's why it actually got completed, again, through government control. And, you know, if we were in some bizarre world, some upside down universe where you know, there were windmills in abundance. We were getting a lot of our energy from that, and all of a sudden, government found this black goop that came from the ground that was able to power cities and make car engines run faster. They'd be in favor of it. They'd be in favor of drilling, of fracking, because it would be government then controlling that industry, that kind of energy. And with the free market, though, if you don't like a service being provided, you take your money and you go elsewhere. And because of that dynamic, we of course get competition. Somebody is always trying to innovate a product or service to gain a share of the market. And that means people who aren't happy with their current offering, they always find the path of least resistance. They find something better. And that is why, with creativity, with competition, you get vibrant innovation. But when a government agency or entity monopolizes a service, you get pre-approved innovation. You always get innovation based on what the government has in mind. There is always a conclusion, and the grants are handed out based on what that conclusion is. And if you're lucky, you know, you might get some super smart people running a department, and innovation is able to happen quicker. But on whole, if it's left up to politicians, unfortunately, innovation comes second. And that is unfortunate. So I think government isn't good at running much. And if they were, and if people say, well, maybe government is, well, what would happen if the government ran the music industry? Well, you'd probably stifle all kinds of music that the government doesn't like. Yeah, you probably would. You wouldn't get the choice. You wouldn't get the innovation. You wouldn't get, and what is good music, right? The member opposite, I bet you my taste in music is totally different than the members opposite. And that's a good thing. But I guarantee you, if the government controlled the music industry, you'd get what government wants. You'd get what the government tells you is music. And that is unfortunate. So with competition, with innovation, with the freest of markets, you get better product, you get a better quality, and you get better price. And that, I think, is lacking in this bill. We don't actually address that. We are still working on the fact that in order to get this fast-track approval, you have to go on you know, begging, whether you have the right lobbyists or lawyers, to government in order to get that approval. That's not innovation, Speaker.